My name is Simon Long. I work for VMware. I am the service owner and lead architect for VMware's internal Horizon deployments. I've also been working with the VMware Cloud Foundation team for probably the last couple of years, helping them develop their EUC strategy. So I'll let Todd introduce himself briefly.
Hey guys, I hope you're awake. I'm just trying to wake up myself here. My name is Todd Simmons. I'm a member of the ISBU, which is the Integrated Systems Business Unit at VMware. I focus on Cloud Foundation. I'm the lead architect for our product, and I'm from Austin, Texas.
Great. Glad we know where you're from. Okay, so today's session, Todd's going to kick off with a good section around what is VMware Cloud Foundation. So for those of you who are not familiar with the solution, you probably all heard it mentioned a few times in the keynote. So hopefully after this section, you'll have a good understanding of what the actual solution is itself. We'll then dig into the Horizon components of what makes up VMware Cloud Foundation with Horizon. We'll take you through the UI, so you can have a look at the UI itself and the wizard that you'll go through to deploy your desktops. And we'll then have a little bit of a demo at the end where we'll show you what's actually happening on the vSphere infrastructure on the back end. Then we should have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, so if you can just hold your questions until the end, and we have some people with mics who will then come around and we can take any questions that you have. So I'll hand it over to Todd for his overview section.
Cool. So just out of curiosity, a show of hands, how many people have actually used Cloud Foundation before? All right, cool. How many people know what it is? All right, fair enough. Well, we'll do a quick overview of Cloud Foundation, give you an idea of what we were hoping to achieve with this particular product, and then at the end you can let us know if we delivered on that goal. One of the first things that we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to implement a standardized architecture. So we found that customers have challenges in installing our software. What I mean by that is it just takes them a long time to get the entire suite of software installed, stood up so that they can use it immediately. So we wanted to help with that process. So one of the things that Cloud Foundation does is it brings up an environment with software and hardware. And we build our environment based on a standardized architecture known as the VMware Validated Design. Have you all heard of the VVD? Awesome. Okay. So we provide an integrated stack which provides compute, storage, and network. For compute, we use ESX, of course. For storage, we use vSAN. For networking, we use NSX. But we also include physical networking as part of the overall solution as well. So we configure the hardware as part of the stack, which includes the network switches, the top-of-rack switches that you'll have, and the management switch within the environment. So it's an engineered solution. It's simple to operate. This is kind of another one of our key pillars. Not only did we want to rapidly install the software based on a VMware validated design, provide you a complete solution in an integrated stack, but we also wanted to make sure that it was easy to use. So on a typical engagement, if I deploy Cloud Foundation for one of my customers, during that day, I have enough time to go over the use of our product, which is SDDC Manager, which you'll see today. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to show somebody how to use it, and that's all you need. So it was one of our key pillars, make sure it's simple to operate, from bring up to lifecycle management, which for us is patching and upgrades. So we do that as well, and we'll show you that. Because this product encompasses so many VMware products, it's sometimes difficult to talk about. So we have this incredibly cool blueprint for Cloud Foundation that you can find online. But I want to tell you the core software that you get with our product. All right, and so that begins with SDDC Manager. SDDC Manager is used for a couple of different things, and you'll see the UI today because we'll use it for the VDI workflow. But what SDDC Manager does is it allows you to create something known as a workload domain. So today we're going to create a workload domain for VDI. So we include SDDC Manager. The latest version is 2.2. We also include vSphere. We include vSAN. We include NSX. And we include vRealize Log Insight as part of the solution. And when I say we include it, I mean we automate the installation of these products. Okay? Optionally, we support the vRealize suite, so vRealize Automation, vRealize Operations, and then of course we support the Horizon suite as well, which is what we'll be talking about today. With Cloud Foundation, there are some hardware requirements. At a bare minimum, to use Cloud Foundation for VDI, you're going to need at least 8 vSAN ready nodes, 4 of which get used for the management workload domain. So if you're familiar with the VVD architecture, that would be a management pod. The other 4 will be used in our environment for desktops. Okay? And you can have more than that. These would just be the minimum requirements. You'll need 2 top-of-rack switches within the environment. Those top-of-rack switches are going to be 10 gig. Each host within the solution is going to have a connection to each one of those top-of-rack switches, so we use 2 for redundancy. And then you also need a management switch. And the management switch is specifically used for IPMI, iDRAC, ILO, right? So that's what the management switch is used. So this is what's included as part of Cloud Foundation and what is required from a hardware perspective. All right, so this slide's kind of neat. At the very top, you'll see that Cloud Foundation is a platform which provides you with compute, storage, and networking. We talked about how we deliver that. We provide lifecycle automation. So the lifecycle automation means we're able to do patching and upgrade of the stack. So we can patch and upgrade vSphere, NSX, vSAN as part of this solution. Cloud Foundation is deployed the same way in the private cloud infrastructure as it is in the public cloud infrastructure. And that's kind of pretty powerful because today when you look at cloud providers, they may be running something completely different than what you're used to on premises. With our product, the way that we deploy Cloud Foundation on premises is exactly the same way it gets deployed in the cloud. So you're familiar with using it either on-prem or in the cloud. It provides comprehensive security. One of the things that you'll see that we do with our Horizon workflow is not only do we deploy an entire Horizon environment, but we also set up the NSX firewall rules so that we can support microsegmentation, which is pretty neat. And then, of course, it enables a path to hybrid cloud. If you're using the same software on premises as you are in the public cloud, it makes it easy to move workloads between the two. So I mentioned that we have some hardware requirements specifically with this product. You need some vSAN ready nodes. You need some top-of-rack switches. The question I usually get asked is, well, which ones do you support? We do have a hardware compatibility guide that you can check out that's online. It's over 60 vSAN ready nodes that are supported from a significant amount of vendors. So we have pretty broad support for our solution today. To give you kind of an idea of the vendors that we support, in the private cloud, you'll see some of the popular vendors that you're already used to working with: Dell, Fujitsu, Cisco, maybe QCT or Hitachi, HPE. And then, of course, in the public cloud infrastructure, we also support Rackspace, Amazon, OVF, or OVH. OVF is a different VMware term, I think, right? All right. So here's what SDDC Manager looks like, guys. It's pretty simple to use. This is the dashboard. Towards the bottom, we have some widgets which show you how much CPU, memory, and storage is available. Up towards the top, you can see that I've got one physical rack. That rack consists of 8 physical hosts and 3 switches. Remember those 2 top-of-rack switches and then the 1 management switch. Right now, I have 1 workload domain that's been created, and it's a management workload domain. So all of the other hosts in the rack are currently available for me to use. And we're going to use them today to create a VDI workload domain. Some other things that you can see to the left-hand side, you've got this status pane. There's just a few things you can do within this interface, by the way. It's pretty simple. The reason you'd go to the status pane is if you triggered a workflow, which automates the installation of, say, VDI or just a standard virtual infrastructure. As it's automating all of those tasks, setting up vSAN, setting up NSX, creating clusters, enabling HA, enabling DRS, and all those fun things, as it does that, you can actually monitor the progress. I think probably a year ago, 2 years ago, that would have been something that I would have done, check, see how it's doing, what's it up to. Today, it's very rarely do I go in there. In fact, to be honest with you, the only time I go in there is when we have a new release, because I want to see how much faster it was than the previous release. So I'll just go into status to see when it finished. For Lifecycle, that's where we do patching and upgrades. So if there was a patch or an upgrade available, when you log into the dashboard, there'll be a banner that says, a patch is available. Would you like to download it from VMware? and then you download a software bundle directly from VMware. So when you need to upgrade this environment, you don't have to spend a ton of time trying to find out, where do I go on VMware's website? What patches do I need to download? What order do I need to install them in? And all that fun stuff. Under users, really there's only 2 users or roles for SDDC Manager. This is a data center administration tool. So the 2 users would be administrator or read-only, or the 2 roles would be administrator or read-only. One of the things that you can do with SDDC Manager is you can create workload domains, right? You can also delete them. So it's a data center administration tool. We wouldn't want to give it to an end user. A workload domain is a cluster of ESX hosts with a vCenter server and an NSX installation. So you wouldn't necessarily want a user to log in and delete one of your workload domains. It would be like blowing away one of your clusters. So typically there's only a few people that have access to this tool in a VMware environment, and this tool isn't something that you would use every day. It's simply used to bring up your environment. After that, you manage your environment the same way that you normally do. Log into the vSphere web client. Okay? Settings, you'll actually see settings as we go through the VDI workload domain creation. It allows us to change things like the custom names that we use for the virtual machines that get deployed. So we'll kind of show you that today. So this workload domain construct is something that's really important to understand with Cloud Foundation. And it's really something that you already know. We just gave it a new name, essentially. So a workload domain is very similar to a pod. What it is a cluster of ESX hosts with a vCenter server and an NSX installation. And that cluster of ESX hosts shares a vSAN data store. Okay? That's essentially what a workload domain includes. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to create a workload domain specifically for VDI. So in addition to that cluster that we have, we'll also be deploying desktops within it. This is one of my favorite slides because it really kind of shows a variety of different workload domains. At the very top, what you see is the management workload domain. So again, if you're familiar with the VVD, think of a pod, right? That's the management pod. Down below, I've created 2 additional workload domains. Here's a workload domain here and another workload domain here. Now, the hosts that make up this workload domain are where you're going to put your virtual machines. The management virtual machines for this workload domain sit in the management workload domain. So you can see this is a cluster of ESX hosts that has vSphere, vSAN, and NSX. The NSX manager sits in the management workload domain, and the vCenter server sits in the management workload domain. So every time you create a new workload domain, its NSX manager and vCenter server will be placed into the management workload domain. Right? So some of the components that these workload domains will share, they'll share the platform services controllers. So we have a single SSO domain. They'll share the log insight installation. So as this workload domain gets created, it automatically gets plumbed into this log insight instance. And if you do install vRealize operations, they'll also share that vRealize operations installation as well. So I hope what we'll be able to show you today are some of the benefits of VDI. What we think the benefits are simply is rapid provisioning. And just out of curiosity, how many folks in here have actually installed Horizon end-to-end, either 6 or 7? Okay, cool. Wow, that's a lot of you. How long did it take you? Like soup to nuts, like getting the desktops up, setting up UEM, app volumes, certificates. Let's ballpark. Don't all shout out at once. A week? 2 weeks? 3 weeks? A month? A week. Okay, cool. We do it in about 4 hours. So I think that's kind of neat. So rapid provisioning. I had a session this week on disaster recovery. And as you know, in the States, we've had quite a few weather events over the last few weeks. And if I could bring up an entire Horizon environment in 4 hours and include the desktops, imagine how helpful that would be in a disaster recovery scenario, right? You've lost an entire site or location, it's been flooded, all of your users don't have desktops anymore, but oh, hey, by the way, I've got Cloud Foundation, and I can deploy Horizon in about 4 hours and give your users desktops. It's a pretty powerful message. Some other things that we do, you're letting automation do all the heavy lifting. So we automate the installation. It takes 4 hours because that's how long it takes to do all of the steps through automation. But in that 4 hours, you can go do something else. You don't have to sit there and watch it do its automation, right? So it makes you more productive. It also reduces errors. When you automate something, it's going to do the same thing every single time. So if you ask 2 people to do the same thing, you might not get the same result. We allow you to expand on demand. So adding additional hosts into that workload domain is super easy. It takes about 15 minutes to add a host into an existing workload domain, and that's the automation tasks taking the time, not you. It's about a minute for you. We also support the ability to delete this workload domain. So if you want to test out Horizon, you could create a workload domain with Horizon, and then when you're done, you can delete that workload domain and use the host for something else, for another cluster of your choice. And then finally, patching and upgrades. Although I do want to be pretty specific here. For lifecycle management, today, we patch and upgrade vSphere, NSX, vSAN. We do not patch and upgrade Horizon just yet. It's something that we're looking at doing in the very near future. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Simon.
Thank you, Todd. Cheers. I was going to ask for a show of hands of who is familiar with Horizon, but from the looks of you, pretty much the majority of you have actually already deployed it. So this part of this section, we kind of want to make sure you have a little bit of an understanding of the different components, because I'm going to be mentioning a few of the components that we use as part of the solution. So if you already have a good understanding, I don't have to kind of explain them to you, which is good. So we've just recently released a version 2.2 of VMware Cloud Foundation. We just wanted to share with you some of the updates that we've done in this solution. So we're now deploying Horizon 7.2, which is the latest Horizon release. So this enables us to use our instant clone technology. We're also deploying app volumes 2.12 as well. We're deploying a UEM file server. So for those of you who want to use UEM, there'll be a file server for you to start using. Some other cool things that I wanted to note, we're using NSX a lot more than previous releases, especially like when we're around talking about NSX load balancing. So when we deploy the Horizon environment, we're going to have at least 2 connection servers. We'll be putting an NSX load balancer in front of those connection servers for you. If you're going to choose app volumes as part of your deployment, we'll put an NSX load balancer in front of your app volumes managers. And similarly with UAGs as well, the unified access gateways. If you need external access, we'll do NSX load balancing there as well. And as Todd mentioned earlier, we're also going to be doing some micro-segmentation around the different management components. So we're kind of really improving the way we're using NSX there. So one of the questions we regularly get asked is, what is included when we talk about VMware Cloud Foundation and Horizon? So I'm not going to cover the management domain. Todd covered that very well in his previous section. So some of the things that we will see once we've deployed our workflow, you're going to see connection servers. You're going to see at least 2. Okay? You may see more than 2 connection servers depending on how many desktops you require within your infrastructure. You may see a composer server or 2 depending if you selected linked clones as part of your workflow. You may see app volumes managers if you will require app volumes. You may see Active Directory content packs for login, sign, VROps if you select them. So these are the kind of things that you will expect to see once you've actually deployed your VDI workflow. So just before we take a look at the UI and kind of through the steps that you would take as the end user to deploy your desktops, there's basically 2 different deployment methods. So I'm just going to cover them here just so you have a good understanding. So when we get to the UI, you're going to be thinking, well, I'm not really sure what these 2 different things mean. So when it comes to the Horizon deployment, we have 2 options. We have the full desktop deployment. What this means is we're going to start off with our management domain, which is already there for us. We will spin up a VDI workload domain, which is essentially a vSphere cluster. Now, this cluster will vary in size depending on how many virtual machines you need and the size of the virtual machines that you'll be running. We'll then install and configure all of the Horizon components required to run the infrastructure. And we will then also spin up a desktop pool for you based on a golden image that you upload as part of the wizard. So we go from nothing to full desktops your users can now log into in one single workflow. The only downside to this full desktop deployment option is you can only actually use a single pool. So for those of you who will maybe require multiple pools in your environment, the next option would be for you, which we call the reserve resources option. So again, we'll have our management domain. We'll spin up a VDI workload domain, which will vary in size. We'll install and configure all of the Horizon components that you select as part of the wizard, and it's at this point the workflow is complete. You will then go into and log into Horizon Administrator and vCenter, upload your golden images, and create your desktop pools as you would a standard Horizon environment. So this allows you to deploy a single pool yourself, or you can then go through and deploy multiple pools. So I imagine the majority of the customers that we're using it right now actually use this option, as most customers that we work with kind of require more than one desktop pool. But if you want to use this as for a POC, for example, the full desktop deployment end-to-end will deploy that single desktop pool for you without you having to do anything more. Okay. So let's take a look at the UI itself. So as we go through the wizard, this is not the UI, by the way. As we go through the wizard, these are the 10 different steps that we're going to have to go through. So there's only 10 steps for you to be able to deploy a full end-to-end Horizon environment. So, and some of these steps are very, very simple, as you'll see when we go through it, just a single tick box. The first thing we want you to do is just go into the settings page, and this is available from the SDDC Manager homepage that Todd highlighted earlier. There's many different settings that you can change in here. However, we don't recommend that you change anything that you are not entirely sure what you're changing. Some of the changes that you could make in here could adversely affect the performance of the platform. So there's some of the things you might consider changing in here is the Active Directory name. VMware Cloud Foundation can deploy an Active Directory domain controller for you. So here you can select the AD name for that. You can change the naming convention of the virtual machines that get deployed if you want it to match up with a naming convention that you may already have within your business. You can also select the OU of where the desktops will get deployed in the new Active Directory if you're deploying an Active Directory with this. So there's loads of other options, and as I say, only change what you necessarily have to change. Don't go in there and kind of tinker with everything, because I know a lot of people like to do that. So to kick off the workflow, we'll be on the SDDC homepage, SDDC Manager homepage. We'll select Add Workload Domain, and we'll click Configure VDI. So if we click Configure VDI, essentially that's going to just deploy us a vSphere cluster. But obviously we want all the Horizon components, so we're going to click Configure VDI. The first page we come to is a prerequisites checklist. We would recommend you go through and read all this to make sure that you have everything available and in place before you start going through this wizard. So it's going to tell you you're going to need a Windows 2012 ISO file that we request you to upload, which we'll then use to install all of the Windows servers that we use as part of this. It'll tell you which network, what networks you require, and just make sure that you have everything in place. So when you get to like step 7 in the wizard, you're not suddenly sitting there thinking, I forgot to put my DMZ network in place. I need to go ask the networking team to deploy that, which could take a day or two. So spend some time going through this prerequisite checklist. Make sure you have everything in place. So just in case you don't go through that prerequisite checklist and you get stuck, in the latest release of Cloud Foundation 2, we've added in this new little thing here called Save and Close. So if you do get to step 7 or 8 and you realize you've forgotten something, you can click Save and Close. You can go off, get that prerequisite back in, and you can kind of pick off where you left off. In previous versions, that wasn't available, so I've spent a lot of time re-going through all the workflows over and over again until I get to back to that point before. So, cool thing. Thanks, Todd. Saved a lot of time for me. Thank you. Okay, so general configuration here. We're going to give the VDI workflow a name, and then we're going to select the deployment type, which is what I just covered earlier, whether we want to do full desktop deployment end-to-end, or whether we want to reserve the resources and just manage the Horizon infrastructure ourselves. We're going to select our desktop types. Link clones, instant clones, full clones are our options here. We then select our assignment type, whether we want a non-persistent or a persistent desktop. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Horizon, if you select instant clones and then try to do a persistent desktop, you won't be able to select that. So it actually has the intelligence on the back end to make sure that you can't select something that our products do not support. The final option at the bottom there, desktop access type. So if you want your users to be able to access the desktops via the internet or on an untrusted network, you select Connect from Anywhere. And we'll basically deploy a couple of unified access gateways into a DMZ network for you so that users can access your environment from external access securely. If you just require your users to access internally, just select corporate network only. So very basic there. We have an option now in VMware Cloud Foundation to deploy an Active Directory domain controller for you. So for those of you who may just want to spin this up for a test and dev environment, and you don't necessarily want to integrate it within your company's Active Directory, you have the option here to just select Use a new AD, and we'll spin up an Active Directory and domain controller. We'll join all the virtual desktops to that infrastructure rather than your own company's infrastructure. For those of you who may want to integrate it with your own business AD, the option is there to select existing, and we'll just require a domain account from you. Same with SQL. If you want VMware Cloud Foundation to deploy its own SQL servers as part of this solution, you can do that. Or if you have a SQL cluster within your business that you want all of your SQL servers to be on, you can select use existing and put in the information there of your SQL server. So lots of options here to either use existing or use VMware Cloud Foundation to spin it all up for you, so you don't actually have to worry about any of the integration pieces. App volumes. Very difficult to deploy app volumes here. You either tick the box or you don't. So if you tick the box, we'll deploy 2 app volume managers for you behind an NSX load balancer VIP, and we'll also install the app volumes agent in the image of the desktops if you're doing a full desktop deployment. So extremely simple to deploy app volumes. So if you're going to use app stacks in your environment or writable volumes, just tick that box and we will deploy that for you. Virtual desktop sizes. This is kind of where we start looking at how many desktops do we need in this environment and what are the size of those desktops. So in here, if you had 1,000 desktop requirement, put in 1,000. You put in the size of your golden image, so if it's like 2 CPU, 4 gig of memory or something like that. Once you then click next, we will take that information and we'll do some calculations on the back end to make sure that when we deploy your VDI workload domain, we're actually sizing that domain based on the requirements that you've actually entered here. So we will make sure that we size that cluster with the amount of hosts to support those desktops that you need. So make sure you put in the correct information here, otherwise you may find that clusters either oversized or undersized for the amount of resources you need. Networking, we're going to ask you to enter in a data center network, which is essentially the network where your virtual desktops will live. So here you can just put in your VLAN IDs, your subnet information, your default gateways, etc. You also have the ability to exclude certain IP addresses as well. So if you have devices on that network that you don't want DHCP to supply the IP with, you can kind of exclude those there. And if you select connect from anywhere on the first screen that we saw, here it will also ask you for your DMZ network as well. So you can go through, put in the DMZ network information here, and that will create that network for you. And I believe that also creates a network on other VLANs on the network switch. It does. Okay. So DHCP and DNS, again, similar to Active Directory and SQL, we can either deploy DHCP for you and it'll use the NSX edge gateway to do that, or we can connect to an internal DHCP server that may already have in your business. So you can select the 2 options there. And we also require some DNS names. So if we're going to require a connection server load balancer, VIP URL. These need to be pre-configured and in place before we get to this stage, because we kind of do a check to make sure they exist. And we then create the SSL certificates that we use within the infrastructure from these URLs. So these SSL certificates are self-signed. We get a lot of questions of, well, can I use my own CA signed certificates? We do have a tool that we can supply to you that will actually replace out the certificates that comes with this platform, and you can replace it with your own signed certificates. So we can certainly support your certificates if you need to. Last page, images. As I mentioned earlier, we need to upload a Windows 2012 ISO image. This will be used to install all the Windows servers that are installed as part of the Horizon deployment. So the connection servers, possibly composer servers, app volumes managers, they're all Windows servers. So we'll need your ISO file and your Windows license key. We do not supply the Windows license key for you. And if you select deploy full desktops, we will ask you for your OVA templates. This is your gold master. We need it in an OVA format. And we also need the Windows administrator password for that OVA template. That way we can then go through and install the Horizon agent, app volumes agent, and UEM agent if they're required within your image. So once they're all uploaded from either your laptop or file share up to the SDDC manager, we have a long review page. I recommend you spend some time going through and reviewing this page. It has all the information that you've just entered in. Make sure your desktop deployment type is right. Make sure you're using, whether you want to use link clones, instant clones, etc. Spend some time going through this, because once you click go, it will go off and deploy whatever you specified already. Although, as Todd said, you can then go back and delete it after a while. I would always recommend just spending 5 minutes going through this, so then you don't have to go through and delete. I've done it so many times. I've put in the wrong IP addresses or something like that in the networking, and I've had to go through and delete it and start it all again. But I mean, it's only 4 hours, right? So it's not a big deal, but definitely spend some time to review. Once you're happy with it, click go, and the workflow just goes off and runs and does its thing. So you can go grab a coffee, go play golf, wherever it is you want to do for the next 4 hours. And hopefully when you come back, you should have a good, stable Horizon environment. So it's as simple as that. So that's the UI and the wizard that you go through to deploy your Horizon environment. So just before we go through and show you a bit of a demo and have a look at the vSphere infrastructure underneath, I just want to talk to you about a project that I was working on internally within VMware. So as I mentioned, I'm the lead architect and service owner for VMware's internal Horizon deployments. We've got 3 deployments globally. So we've got one large one in the US, we've got one in India, and we've got one in EMEA. The deployment that we've just deployed in EMEA, we use VMware Cloud Foundation to deploy our Horizon environments. The other 2 environments were deployed manually. So we deployed 1,000 desktops of capacity there. We used the reservation workflow, so we require more than 1 desktop pool. So we just use the resource reservations there, deploy the infrastructure, and then manage our pools directly through Horizon Administrator. And we also deployed app volumes as well, because we use both app stacks and writable volumes within our environment. So I just want to share with you some of my main benefits that I see as part of this, because I've helped manually build 2 previous infrastructures. Deployment time obviously is a big thing. It was taking us 1 to 2 weeks to deploy all the components in our infrastructure. This obviously was drastically reduced using this workflow. User errors. We have a great build team within our team at VMware. Unfortunately, all of the guys in the build team, they're all human. And we all make mistakes, right? All humans make mistakes. It's very easy for people to put in the wrong IP addresses, the wrong DNS names, download the wrong ISO file for a different image. With this VMware Cloud Foundation platform, as long as we go through the VDI workflow and put in the correct information once, we know that it will deploy whatever we have requested. There will be no mistakes. So this has helped us reduce a lot of user errors that we were seeing as part of our deployment. But for me as an architect, the main one for me is this here. So for those of you who are Horizon architects, you'd probably all agree with me that the most difficult part and most complex part of architecting a Horizon environment is actually kind of sizing the environment to make sure you have good performance for your desktops. This is something that can take a lot of time if you're not familiar with the product, and for those of you who aren't really Horizon architects, it can be quite complex. The good thing about VMware Cloud Foundation is when you go through the wizard and you put in how many desktops you need and the size of those desktops, we will do the sizing calculations for you. We will factor in vSAN overhead. vSAN requires CPU and memory in our cluster. So we want to make sure that we have enough resource for vSAN to function, for NSX to function. All of those components that require resources, we don't want to just spin up enough hosts for the desktops. We want to factor in everything in that cluster. So when we deploy VMware Cloud Foundation, we know that it's sized for performance. And for me, that's one of the benefits of this platform as an architect. So we're going to have a look now at the vSphere infrastructure underneath, and Todd's going to show you kind of where the VMs live and what it looks like. So once it's deployed, you have an idea of what it is, essentially. Cool. So let me flick over. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, so I would actually love to give you a live presentation of a VDI workflow or a VDI workload domain. The problem is it takes about 4 hours, and this session isn't 4 hours long. So what we've done here is, since Simon already showed you how to go through SDDC Manager to create the workload domain, I want to show you what it looks like inside of vSphere after the creation has been done. Okay? Because we automate the installation of the components, but when we're done, you're just going to manage the environment the same way that you manage it today. You're going to use the vSphere web client. You're going to use the View Administrator. Okay? So what I'll show you here is right now I am logged into the vSphere web client, and I'm looking at the workload domain where the desktops are going to be placed. So remember, we have 2 workload domains. One is that management pod, where all the Horizon components get installed. And then the other workload domain is really where we're going to put all of the desktops. Okay? So that's what I'm looking at right now. Spin up. So I'll show you the virtual machines that get deployed. So as Simon went through the workflow, one of the things that he chose to do was to create 25 desktops. And when he did that, we went in and we deployed those 25 desktops here. So you can see that the desktops are deployed, and of course, some of those desktops are powered off because we don't have any users connected to them right now. You can see the desktops. You'll see some other things up here as well. I have a template, which I use, a master template. I have some NSX controllers, because we deploy NSX as part of the overall solution. And then I have a replica that's here, because I may have deployed linked clones within the environment. See all the VMs? Cool. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I want to go over to the management workload domain. And so because Cloud Foundation has a shared SSO domain, you have a single pane of glass with a vSphere web client. So you can see the vCenter server that's managing all of the desktops, and you can see the vCenter server that's managing the management workload domain. And since that's where all of our Horizon components get installed in that management workload domain, I'm going to go to that management workload domain vCenter server now, and I'm going to show you the Horizon components that were deployed.
Todd, it's just worth pointing out as well, if you're using this within your environment and you may have other workloads like a VI workload, just a standard vSphere cluster, you will also see that vCenter in here as well. It won't just be the Horizon, the management domain. It'll be any workload domain that you deploy. So,
yeah, it's a great point. We actually have one management workload domain, but it's not per every installation that you do. So you could have a management workload domain for the VDI workload domain that we've created and multiple VI workload domains that got created as well. So it's a shared management workload domain. So here you can see that we've deployed an Active Directory, domain controller, a composer server, some connection servers. The Active Directory domain controller, it's not something that we see a lot of customers deploy for production use cases because they already have Active Directory. But think if you were trying to train somebody on Horizon, or if you're working with a customer that wants to do just a proof of concept. It's nice to be able to deploy AD so that you don't have to plumb it into their existing environment. Gives them something to play around with. So that's why we have that there today. I'm going to go through, just kind of spin through some of those virtual machines. You can see I've got Log Insight, the connection servers, Composer, Active Directory. And the next thing I want to do here is just log into View Administrator. Now, I don't have a login to Horizon 7. I didn't have enough time for this event to do it for Horizon 7. But if you use Horizon 6 and 7, you know that View Administrator hasn't changed that significantly. So I'm going to log into View Administrator. And I'll look at the desktop pool that was created. Again, we have two options. You can choose to deploy desktops or reserve resources. If you deploy desktops, we will create one desktop pool for you. If you just reserve resources, you would come in here and manually create the pools yourself. Okay? So I've got one pool that's already been created. And of course, all the virtual machines that are members of that pool are listed here as well. What do you think? Big time saver for an implementation, for sure. Yeah, that's it. How about some questions?
Yeah, questions. Okay, we did have someone with a mic, but I don't think they're here, so you might just have to shout and we'll try and
Sure. How do you manage multiple VLANs?
So if you have multiple desktop pools, basically, so.
Yep, so inside of Cloud Foundation, we have the ability to add in an external network. And when you go into Cloud Foundation and add in an external network, it basically creates a port group in the VDS within the environment, and then it goes up to the physical switch, and it tags the ports that the hosts for Horizon are using with the VLAN that you've just created. So you don't have to actually log into the physical switch. You can do it through SDDC Manager.
So can you have more than one VLAN?
Sure, absolutely. You can create multiple VLANs. The UI only lets you create one initially, but you can go back in after. Yep.
Yeah, we have multiple VLANs within our environment. We have 1,000 desktops. We don't particularly want to put them all on one VLAN, so we maybe split them out to 4 or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? And obviously, we'll be around after the session as well, so if you'd rather just come up to us and ask us, that's absolutely fine as well.
Yeah.
Hold on, could you...
Desktop pools?
Yeah, so there's two options. So to deploy desktops, we'll actually deploy the desktops in a single pool that we create. To reserve resources, we'll just select the number of physical hosts that you need to support the number of desktops you want to deploy, but then you would manually go in and create any of the desktop pools that are required.
Okay. I just thought it's not fixed that you have to do one or the other. You can have a mix of both. Is that correct?
What's that? I'm sorry?
So you can have a mix. It's the default pool as well as the reserved resources.
Oh, it's one or the other.
Desktop pools.
You would either deploy desktops with the pool, which would be just one pool, or you could reserve resources with no pools.
Oh,
let's just say, though, for instance, let's say you chose to deploy it with one pool and later on decided, oh, you know what, I need another pool.
Yep.
Just log into Horizon and create another pool.
Okay.
That's totally cool.
Yeah, because if you run them both at the same time, you'll end up with 2 Horizon environments because it'll deploy 2 lots of connection servers, and it'll be like essentially then 2 Horizon environments. So, yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
Can you share with us some use cases of this platform? Because most of the customers already have Horizons already installed. So how can we use this for upgrades maybe or other use case?
Sure. Yeah. One of the core competencies we have is installing the entire environment. So if you already have it installed, that certainly takes away one of our largest use cases. But the other use case would be patching and upgrades. And today we automate the patch and upgrade of vSphere, vSAN, NSX within the environment. We don't do that for Horizon at the moment, but it's something that we're looking into in the very near future.
Can we run on VMware? Because I didn't see the hardware.
No, so VxRail has its own UI for management. We have about 60 vSAN ready nodes that we support. And in the deck, we have a link to the hardware compatibility list, which gives you a list of every single server and top-of-rack switch that we support within our environment.
There's one at the back there.
What about using cloud pod architecture? Can you do that?
CPA.
CPA.
We've been discussing this a lot over the last couple of days.
Yeah. You want to take this?
Yeah, so essentially, out of the box, you can't do it, but we don't do it as part of the automation process. So if you had 2 VMware Cloud Foundation pods in a separate environment, you would just enable it via Horizon as you would a normal Horizon environment. So you just need to make sure there's network connectivity between the 2 sites, ports are open, etc. But it's not something that we automate yet, but we are planning on putting it into future releases because it's something that we get a lot of questions around. So.
Yeah, especially this event, we've got quite a few questions regarding CPA, so we'll probably put together a white paper on it.
Yeah. But essentially, once it's up and running, it's just a Horizon environment. It's no different to anything else, so you just manage it as a Horizon environment going forward. So just tick that box, enable it, and you're good.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about Cloud Foundation, guys, is we didn't want to become a mom product, right? We didn't want to become a manager of managers, right? We didn't want to replace functionality in our existing products with SDDC Manager. So what you notice is you don't spend a lot of time in SDDC Manager. You use it for the installation, for patching and upgrades, maybe adding a network. But the bulk of the work that you'll do will be the way that you do it today. Log into the vSphere web client, log into the Horizon View Administrator, and manage your environment. That's why there's very little training required to use this product. I mean, you can show somebody how to use it in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, since we built our EMEA environment, I've not actually logged into SDDC Manager. Our build team put the environment in place. I just use the same tools like Horizon Administrator, vCenter. I just use those guys. And then as soon as the maintenance team needs to do an upgrade, they'll use SDDC Manager to do the upgrades. But me as an administrator of the Horizon environment, I don't even touch SDDC Manager. So, yeah.
Will NVIDIA Grid be supported in the near future?
Will we support what?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Will NVIDIA Grid
We do actually, we support it today. So we have a customer that has deployed a VDI workload domain, and they have NVIDIA cards in the servers inside of Cloud Foundation. So we do it.
But it's not like automated though, right?
Yeah.
They had to go and install the VIP themselves.
Right.
But, yeah.
What we don't do as part of the initial bring up is install the VIB for the NVIDIA card. So you'd have to do that manually. Small step.
think we're good then. Well, again, thank you for coming so early in the day on the last day of VMworld. So we hope you make use of the last time you have here, and maybe we'll see you again next year. So
All right. Thanks
for your time.